if 9-year-old Jameela could see you today, what would she say about your career trajectory?
I think she'd just be really impressed that I got to meet all of her favourite actors eventually, have a picture with them. She was very shallow. So am I. That's all I cared about when I was younger. I'm Jameela Jamil, and this is a guided tour of my career and life. I would describe my childhood as a dumpster fire of hell and chaos. I was born in London. I grew up around a lot of very unhappy and unwell people. It's very difficult as a child who doesn't really understand what's happening, or that it isn't your fault that other people around you are sad. This is one of the most defining moments of my life. I was 17 years old, walking down a pavement, that's a sidewalk in America. A bee is coming down the same sidewalk. I am terrified of bees, irrationally afraid, so my survival instinct kicked in and told me, just run into oncoming traffic. I get hit by one car, my body flings up in the air, at which point I get hit by another car. There it is. That's actually a really great sound effect. Ran home, didn't tell my mother because I thought I'd gotten away with it. I thought I was fine. And then an hour later, I must have just blacked out and I wasn't able to walk again for another year. It was lonely. I was isolated. And so the only friends I really had were the people that I was watching on television. It was such a formative moment. I was just kind of crossing from being a teenager into an adult, and I needed guides. And so I looked to the people of mostly American TV. And so I think almost like via osmosis, I learned how to host and how to act without ever having trained. My biggest lesson was just to be kind and respectful towards my body and towards my life, and to be grateful for what I do have, because you never know when it can be taken away. By the time I was fully better, I was almost 19. First thing I did was go back to the video store that I'd already worked in, but then I got fired because I got caught stealing a lot of ice cream. So after that, I became a human test subject. I would try all kinds of hair and skin stuff, makeup. I've had like dandruff for 10 years since doing that. I worked as a secretary, I was a PA. Oh my God, I was a waitress, and I got fired on like my first day because I spilled soup on an old lady. Finally, I landed upon this advert for teaching English as a foreign language. So I was like, that's it. That's what I'm gonna do. You didn't really need that many qualifications. I lied and said I had some anyway. That job was pivotal to my career in so many different ways, and it turned me into a performer. I remember one of the more embarrassing moments was having to teach an entire class full of Polish nuns who were all in their late 60s and 70s, via the art of mime, why they shouldn't pronounce sitting as shitting. So I was there squatting in front of a room full of Polish nuns, pretending to take a shit. And I think after that, I was really just able to do anything, because shame was sort of dead forever. Especially when we're young, we don't know ourselves or what we're capable of, so stay open. My being willing to try all these different things accidentally led me to the rest of my life. And that wouldn't have happened if I'd made this like finite plan that I had to stick to. So just stay flexible. While being an English teacher, we had this pub that we would go to right next door, and a man came up to me, we started chatting, and after a while he said, you know, you'd be good on television. And I was like, ugh, no, I would never work in show business. Then he said that it was £1,000 a day to work in TV, and that there was this open call nationwide to replace Alexa Chung. And I was like, oh, what was that email again? I really wanted £1,000 a day, so I went for it. And a week after that, I was starting live on national television by myself. It was this huge youth entertainment show, kind of like TRL, but if TRL went on all weekend. It was a massive opportunity, and it really should have gone to someone more experienced than me. TV was great. I did it for like 3 years. I learned so much, but I wanted to be goofy. I wanted to do more comedy. I wanted to write. I wanted to make documentaries, and I feel as though people couldn't see me as anything other than a fashion girl. So I decided to try radio, so that if you couldn't see me, maybe you'd start to take me seriously as a broadcaster. and I applied for a job at Radio 1, and I had to replace one of their big DJs just for one day, and it went really well because I told a really inappropriate story live on national radio. I really learned how to become a broadcaster there because I no longer could rely on my looks or what I was wearing or on my facial expression. And you're also driving the desk. You have the whole of the BBC at your fingertips. You could do anything. You could just ruin the entire network. Be willing to embarrass yourself. Be willing to be vulnerable publicly. Try things that you don't know how to do, because you never know. You might just learn. A doctor checked my boob, found a lump, and I had to have a biopsy, and I had to wait a week to find out what the results of that biopsy were. It feels like the longest week of your life when you're waiting for results. And I made this sort of like bucket list, although I call it a bucket list, when it turned out that it would actually just be a very simple operation and it wasn't full cancer and I wasn't gonna have to have chemo or anything. I ultimately decided to move to Los Angeles, and I packed all my stuff in a bag and I said goodbye to everyone. I quit my job and I left. I wanted to be a writer and a DJ. I had no visa, no contacts, no nothing. I had a hope to just be allowed to have the space to reinvent myself and to find out who I am now rather than be held forever to who I was at 22. Once I got here, I started writing, wrote a pilot. That pilot got sent by a friend to a manager at 3 Arts, and they were also making The Good Place. A lot of managers don't have a lot of Indians, so I think, they really just, they needed one to send in. Overly tall, annoying, English, that's me. And I was very, very against the idea. I had lots of very judgmental and nasty thoughts about actors. I thought they would all be vacuous arseholes. Turns out I was the arsehole. They'd really talked me into it by saying that I was gonna maybe meet Mike Schur at the audition. And as a young writer, who better for you to meet than the king of comedy himself? It was a Friday. Suddenly, at 9:30 p.m., I get this phone call, and I pick up the phone, and all of my agents, because in America you have to have like 700 agents, managers, I don't know why, but everyone was on the phone, and they were like, congratulations, you're an actress now. And I was so stunned and terrified that I had to lie down in the middle of the sidewalk, just staring up at the stars, take in the fact that, what have I done? I'm not gonna be able to act, and I'm gonna ruin the show, and then England's gonna be so embarrassed of me, and then I'm gonna become a national disgrace. People kept on coming up to me to ask me if I was okay. I was like, yeah, I'm just an actress, I'm just an actress. And now my life has completely changed, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I owe him everything. In Hollywood, they set an insane amount of time for hair and makeup for actresses. Having never been an actress before, I was not down for that. I didn't understand why the boys were coming in 25 minutes before we were shooting, and yet I was expected to be there at 4:30 a.m. I'm a little bit offended that you think it's going to take an hour and 45 minutes for me to look presentable for camera. That's inappropriate. I would like the same hair and makeup time as the boys, and I will do my own makeup, and therefore I was able to sleep, and therefore I was able to remember my lines better, and therefore I became a better performer. The goal for me was to be funny. It wasn't just to look good, to be funny on camera, opposite Ted Danson. I really think this is such a big part of why women are kind of held back as a gender, because we are told that we're supposed to spend more time on our appearance, and we're supposed to sleep less and eat less and exercise too much. The industry is something that I think is fun to participate in, but I moonlight as a performer. My real goal is to shed light on all the things that I didn't understand when I was an 11 or 12-year-old, looking through the magazines, thinking what I was seeing was real. And so I guess I'm a kind of Trojan horse, lifting back the curtain and telling everyone all of the secrets. We cannot deny our responsibility as an industry. It's awful. As to how we impact culture and society, I'm determined to be that until they run me out of town. In this industry, it's really important to not burden yourself with the responsibility to be liked and approved of and believed by everyone. It hasn't really happened for any woman who's been in the spotlight in this industry, ever. So be yourself, be respectful, be professional, but stand firm in what you deserve. When I was 26, I was on the radio, I'd made history because I got this huge job and no woman in 60 years had ever gotten this job on the radio. And on the day that they were releasing our ratings, no one talked about mine and I'd gained 200,000 listeners. The media was too obsessed with the fact that I'd gained a couple of dress sizes instead. And I snapped in a way that I had never snapped before. We don't listen to the marginalized, we listen to the privileged, and it's a really gross part of our society, but it's also something that we have to acknowledge is a truth. I then decided to use every single interview I would ever have to talk about feminism, eating disorders, the weight loss industry. I'd had an eating disorder for pretty much my entire teens. I wanted to try and stop the next generation of little girls from feeling the way that I did, which is that I'm not good enough to even be alive in this world if I'm not a size 0. I Weigh is a mental health movement and an allyship platform. I started it in 2018 because The Good Place wanted me to really become more active on Instagram so I could promote the show. So I clicked on that terrible magnifying glass, the explore button, and because I'm a woman of a certain age, it just kept on sending me pictures of celebrities, female celebrities, with their weight written across their bodies. I had PMS. I was bored on my boyfriend's tour bus and I just had my Twitter in my hand. I weigh my relationship and my contribution to society and my bone disease and my eating disorder I've overcome and my orgasms. I weigh the sum of all of my mother parts. Thousands of women wrote back to me, sending me what they weigh. I think I really just hit upon a moment where we were just maxed out on being fed up of being underestimated and forced to be valued by nothing other than a number on a scale just because we're women. I just started an Instagram account that I thought would last a couple of weeks, and yet now, 2.5 years later, we have become no longer just about eating disorders and about body image, but we're now about all mental health issues, all marginalization, and most importantly, we are a place where you can come to learn about other people. Rather than be shamed in our society for what you don't know, we are excited for what you want to learn. Your work is never done. There is always more to do, more to learn, and better that you can be. That's why I call myself a feminist in progress, because I feel as though I'm going to be learning for the rest of my life. We have to update with the times, and already seeing how much is changing and how much more aware we're becoming just in the last couple of years shows me that we will always have to be vulnerable and open to criticism and open to learning. We love perfection in this generation, but I'm not that, and I'm just gonna stay and continue to work on myself in my own time. And those who like me can stay, and those who don't, I understand. I believe the magic of life happens in the periphery. It's not necessarily always where you're looking or where you're headed. It's all the opportunities that pop up on the side that we've been told to ignore, that we must not ignore. Because sometimes that's where we learn who we are, what we want, and what we're capable of.